This is when the lower note of an interval becomes the higher note, or the higher note becomes the lower note, which changes the name. For example, if we had a C to a G, this would normally be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would be a perfect fifth. But then, if we kept the G on the bottom, but moved the C to the top, this would become a 1, 2, 3, 4, becoming a perfect fourth. Another example would be an F to a D. This would normally be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so a major sixth. But if we kept the D here and moved the F here, this would become a 1, 2, 3, so a minor third. This is because the F natural is not in the key of D, but the D is in the key of F, which changed the name. Our next example is F to C, which would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a perfect fifth, keeping the C the same and moving the F to the top would change it to a 1, 2, 3, 4, a perfect fourth. Here's a few quick tips about inversions. So, instead of counting up all the steps to figure out what the inversion is, you can just do 9 minus whatever the first one was. So, 9 minus 5 is 4, and 9 minus 6 is 3. And a way to figure out what the next type of inversion is that perfects always go to another perfect. Augmented always goes to diminished. Diminished always goes to an augmented interval. A major interval always goes to a minor interval. And finally, a minor interval always goes to a major interval. Our final topic for today is compound intervals. And this is when we take a normal interval, such as a C to a D, which is a major second, and then expand it over an octave. So, we keep the C here, but we move the D up here, which makes this a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a major 9. And we know it's still major because a D is in the key of C. Our next example is a C to an E, which would normally be a major third, but then keeping the C here, but moving the E up here changes it to a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a major 10th. And once again, we still know it's major because an E is in the key of C. A quick tip on figuring out how the numbers change instead of counting up every single note is you take the first number, which here is a 2, and you add 7. So 7 plus 2 is 9. And same goes for this one. 3 plus 7 is 10, figuring out what your inversion number is. Now before I have a couple example problems for you to try, I'm going to go briefly through all the topics we've gone through today, just so you can refresh your memory. First, we have the perfect intervals, which are used with unisons, fourths, fifths, octaves, and octaves. And this is when the top note is in the key signature of the bottom note. Second, we have the major intervals, which is used with seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. And this is when, just like in the perfect, the top note is still in the key signature of the bottom note. Next we have minors, which is used with the same as the majors, so seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. And instead of the top note still being in the key signature of the bottom note, the top note is lowered half a step, making it minor. Augmented intervals are used with perfects and majors, and when the top note is raised half a step. And diminished intervals are used with perfects and minor intervals, but the top note is lowered half a step. So the next topic we talked about was enharmonic intervals. And these were intervals that sounded the same but had different names. So for example, if you had a C going to a G sharp, which would be an augmented fifth, and then next to it you had a B sharp going to an A flat, which would be a diminished seventh. These would all sound the same, but they had different names. This is because the C and the B sharp sound the same, just as the G sharp and the A flat. So next we talked about tritones, and these are used with perfect fourths and diminished fifths. And this is because on either side there are 3 whole steps which make up the octave. Next we talked about the inversions of intervals. And so this was when you had the top note of an interval become the bottom note, or the bottom note became the top note. And to figure out what the number of the new interval would be, you take the first note number and you would minus that number from 9. So for example, if your first interval was a perfect fifth, you would do 9 minus 5, so you know that your new interval would be a perfect fourth. So remember, perfect intervals always go to perfect intervals, augmented goes to diminished, diminished goes to augmented, major goes to minor, and minor goes to major. Next we talked about compound intervals. And this is when you would spread an interval over an octave. So if you took a C and a D, but moved the D up here, it becomes a major ninth. And to remember how to figure out the second number of your new interval, you would take the first number and add 7 to it. So, for example, if you had a major second, you would add 2 plus 7, which would give you 9. So now I have a few examples for you to try. First, tell me what the interval is here, and same for this one. Then for this one, tell me what a perfect fourth would be above G. And for this one, tell me what a major sixth would be above C. And then for these ones, tell me what the new inversion would be if you took this major third and put the bottom note to the top. And then for this one, which is a diminished fifth, if you took the top note, which is a C natural, and brought it down to the bottom. I'll post the answers to these questions right after, so now would be the time to pause and try them yourself. So thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something about intervals.